This is History Myths and Misconceptions. And today's misconception is the Pantheon, temple to all the gods. The misconception that arguably Rome's greatest temple, known as the Pantheon, was dedicated to all the gods obviously comes from its name. The Greek word Pantheion literally means to all gods. It is basically a temple's nickname, and the original name is forgotten. Or maybe it was originally the Pantheon as well. We just don't know. This story is really weird, and I will briefly explain why. The original temple was built by Agrippa during the reign of Augustus. That's why his name is on the building up to this day. But since that time, the temple has been rebuilt at least a couple of times. It is believed that it was mostly destroyed during the fire, first under Domitian, and then a restored version of the temple, once again at the time of Trajan. The major reconstruction happened once again either at the time of Trajan or later under his successor Hadrian. But it was definitely Hadrian who finished the new Pantheon. Which part of the original structure, Agrippa's Pantheon, was integrated into Hadrian's Pantheon is unknown. It is possible that Hadrian's version of the temple was essentially constructed almost from scratch. Hadrian left the original inscription. That's why Agrippa's name is still on the Pantheon, even though it is actually Hadrian's temple. The problem here is that it is not entirely clear from the appearance of the temple to which god it was dedicated. The building is very well preserved because it was appropriated by Christians and became a Christian church. They obviously redecorated the temple, so we don't know what images of the gods were inside. The sources don't say much about the Pantheon. There are only a couple of passages in the ancient texts. The most prominent is from Cassius Dio, and his account is really strange if you'll think about it for a couple of minutes. He describes Agrippa's Pantheon, and the exact quote is, "Also he completed the building called the Pantheon. It has this name, perhaps because it received among the images which decorated it the statues of many gods, including Mars and Venus. But my own opinion of the name is that, because of its vaulted roof, it resembles the heavens." Cassius Dio supposedly was born something like 30 years after Hadrian rebuilt the temple. And somehow he doesn't know why the temple was called the Pantheon during the time of Agrippa. And probably why it is called the Pantheon at all. And the Pantheon was actually functioning during the time Cassius Dio spent in Rome. It is believed that Cassius Dio was a senator and even a consul during the reign of Septimius Severus, and later once again under Severus Alexander. He lived in the city of Rome. Septimius Severus, by the way, commissioned the repairs of the Pantheon. But somehow Cassius Dio doesn't know the origins of the name the Pantheon. But he apparently knows that it was not a temple to all the gods. Maybe to more than one god, but not all of them. It is really hard to explain why Cassius Dio, a historian, has no idea about the origins of the name of the temple, located basically around the corner from the place where he worked. One of the explanations is actually that he lived much later than he claims in his writings. Yes, it is extremely weird. So what is the Pantheon? What was its purpose? Well, it is a marvelous structure with a huge dome and the oculus in its center. The dome itself is one of the actual wonders of the world. That's the 19th century level of technology, and it is an awe-inspiring sight even now. What is also interesting is that the Pantheon has the same width and height, 43.2 meters. You can put a sphere inside. It is perfectly symmetrical. And yes, the oculus again. which lets the rays of the sun inside, and quite probably the whole structure could work as some sort of a gigantic sundial. That's one of the theories, and it is quite believable if you get inside of the building. Also, it must be noted that the dome was originally covered in bronze. Christians stripped the dome from bronze in the 17th century. So one of the very believable theories says that the Pantheon actually looks suspiciously like a temple dedicated to some solar deity. Maybe it was Sol. Maybe it was Apollo. Maybe it indeed represented a monotheistic component which exists in most of the polytheistic religions. So indeed, it actually could be a temple to all of the gods at once, who are essentially just the aspects of the universe. Yes, ancient philosophers had this concept. I'm not making things up. And the shape of the circle had a deep meaning, for example, for Plato, who even associated it with the sun god Apollo, more or less the god of reason, the god of all things rational. It could be a temple of some connected, transcendent, so to speak, god, like Serapis. But all of this is pure speculation, theories, more believable and less believable. The bottom line is, nobody knows for sure.